The hot hatch is, it's glorious, isn't it? It's probably the most fun type of car out there. It's the one we can actually sort of think about owning ourselves rather than just salivating over. Over the last few years, we've absolutely adored the Fiesta ST, banged on about the Civic Type R, and loved the latest Golf GTI. All of them very different in so many ways, but still retaining that hot hatch brilliance.
What is a hot hatch anyway? We can say those three cars are all hot hatches, but what makes those three really quite different machines part of the same group? Well, after some intensive market research, we at GR&R have come up with an important 5-point test to work out what is and isn't a hot hatch. Number 1, is it a hatchback? Quite obvious, that really. Number 2, is it faster than the standard car? Couldn't really be called hot if it wasn't, could it? 3, is it lightweight? You can't really chuck around something that weighs 5 tons, can you? 4, does it look cooler than the standard car? I mean, that could just be some nice decals or a big fat exhaust, something like that. 5, pretty key this one, is it fun? Because you can't really have a hot hatch that's not fun. And that brings us to this badge right here. This sort of bronzy spider looking thing. Because that you've probably seen around a lot more recently means Cupra. And Cupra, for its entire life, has meant only one thing: hot hatches. But this one, the Cupra Born, is an EV. And we've done some serious research and found that we don't think there is an EV hot hatch for sale at the moment. So, the purpose of today is to work out whether the Cupra Born passes our 5-point hot hatch test and therefore could be marketed as the world's first EV hot hatch. Before we move on, let's just answer question number 1, shall we? Yes. Historically, hot hatches have been lightweight. They've been fun, feisty little boxes that you chuck around and have fun in. The original Volkswagen Golf GTI, the first hot hatch, was 810 kilograms. Even today, though cars have got heavier, the current Fiesta ST weighs 1,088 kilograms. The Cupra Born, 1,900 kilograms. Lightweight? I'm afraid it's not.
That is nearly 2 tons for a car that might be a hot hatch. The Golf R is a bit lardy these days, and that's 500 or so kilograms lighter. Why? Batteries. It's as simple as that. This Cupra Born has 58 kilowatt hours of batteries stored inside the floor to give it a stated range of 260 miles. It has 204 horsepower and 310 newton-meters of torque, so it will allow you to hit 62 miles an hour in 7.3 seconds, which brings us to...
Now this one, a little bit tricky, because there is no Seat Born. There's only a Cupra Born. But underneath, it's pretty much the same as the Volkswagen ID3, so we can use that as our base. The Volkswagen ID3 is, well, it's exactly as quick as this one. However, if you spend a little bit more money, there are 2 other versions of the Cupra Born. One has exactly the same setup as this, but with e-boost, so it has 231 horsepower. Another has a 77 kilowatt hour battery and will produce 310 horsepower, and therefore will hit 62 miles an hour in 6.6 seconds. And at that point, it's only 0.3 seconds slower to 62 miles an hour than the current Golf GTI. I think that means the Cupra Born passes test number 3. Yes, we have missed a number here, but we will come back to that, I promise. I think the question of whether the Cupra Born is fun has a few more layers than just, is it good to drive around? We'll start with, what's it like in here? And you have to start there with the ID3, because as we all know, the ID3 inside is a little bit, plasticky and low quality, isn't it? But this one Now this one's really nice, and they've really tried to amp up the Cupra-ness of this. It's bronze absolutely everywhere, including in the middle of these rather jazzy seats, which, you know, they look like nice sports seats, but they provide absolutely no side bolstering, and there's a little hole in the middle. But if you look, it's got loads of little bronze bits coming through the middle. The rest of it is all built from really nice quality materials, and it's a lovely place to spend some time. It's a real upgrade on the ID3. Take the nice crinkled plastic all around the sides. It does still have the ID3's infotainment system, which is, well, it's a little bit rubbish, but it is a lot nicer place to be than the ID3 in almost every other way. Fun to drive? Well, it's not exactly quick in a straight line, or at least it doesn't feel it, especially compared to EVs, but even compared to most hot hatches of its size. 7.3 seconds feels longer than it actually is when you're doing it, and when you show it a corner, it doesn't roll. It's not like it becomes a horrible flabby mess when you send it from left to right, but it's really not particularly happy that it's happening. The suspension is smooth and it's very comfortable. That's what this car is very good at. It's comfortable, but it doesn't feel happy when you're asking it to deal with lateral loads. And if you're ever to come across, say, a bump in the middle of a corner, well, then you'll be presented with a slightly unnerving hop as it sort of tries to leave the ground but also gather itself back together again. It's unnerving. The steering, well, the nose is somewhere over there and my hands are here, but the two don't necessarily feel like they meet. You can make the steering heavier by changing it to its performance mode, which also quickens up the response to the throttle, but it doesn't really make a lot of difference. It's a quick rack, so it's not sluggish, but it doesn't really feel like it's particularly happy when you do force it to turn in. It's also, unlike most hot hatches, rear-wheel drive, more efficient in an EV, and you can feel it, especially in the wet. But, especially if you turn the ESC into sport, because you cannot turn it off for some reason, I don't know why, you can get the back end to shimmy a little bit, and in the wet you can get it to slide a little bit, especially when you put your foot down. It's actually, you know what, that's actually quite fun. What it's really good at, what it's best at, is being comfortable. When you've got it in comfort mode, it rides all these bumps perfectly happily. It will cruise along to your heart's content, but it will never engage you, it will never delight you, it will never excite you.
So it's not that fun then. But this is actually just an upmarket ID3. That's why there's no Seat Born. A Seat would have had to have been cheaper than the ID3, and the plastics in the VW are already reasonably low rent, so it needed a Cupra badge. Put all that together and forget this hot hatch discussion for a minute, and this is the car the ID3 should have been all along. This interior is great. The seats are very comfortable. There's absolutely bucket loads of storage space in here, and most importantly, it's incredibly comfortable. Its list price of about £38,000 puts it also head on with the Ioniq 5, and that's in this top spec. So, does that render the entire premise of this film flawed?
Well, no, because there is one more point we've not done yet. When you buy a hot hatch, you want it to look good. You want people to see you when you're around town. And I know that doesn't necessarily mean it's a hot hatch, but I'd argue with this one, it blooming well does, because the way they've styled it. So, start off here, it's got a great big bronze splitter at the front. And then you go down the side and there's all this aero work in the sills and it's deep. And then there's these massive 20-inch dishes of wheels. And then at the back, it's got a spoiler. And most of all, it's got a fake diffuser at the bottom. And if there's anything that screams hot hatch more than spoiler and diffuser, I'm yet to see it. And that's the whole ball game. The thing is, I really like this car. it's comfortable, it's a really nice place to be. It looks great from the outside. It's so much better than the ID3. There's absolutely bucket loads of space and storage space and handy cubbies in here. If you've got a family, it'll be brilliant and a great first EV for you. But the looks promise something that it could absolutely never live up to.
Another problem is that cars like the Kia EV6 may be more expensive and bigger and not meant to look like a hot hatch, but they also show family EVs can be fun to drive. So I'm not sure why a Cupra can't be, especially when it looks like that.